Welcome everyone. Um, Today we will be having a conversation about human trafficking. My name is Perla Hidalgo and I am a licensed social worker at the Sexual Violence Project at BIP. I have been working at BIP since 2017, so that's about 8 years, and I'm very happy to be with you all here today. Before we start, let's get to know who BIP is. So BIP, or the Violence Intervention Program, was founded in 1984, and we are a Latina-led organization that provides healing, housing, and economic justice to thousands of survivors of domestic and sexual violence in New York City each year. Available to all survivors in need, BIP community-based programs largely serve low-income immigrant mothers. BIP is deeply rooted within and specializes in providing culturally specific services to Latinx communities. What we do, we operate 2 residential programs, including a shelter and a transitional housing. We have a live helpline, free counseling programs, and a citywide initiatives on economic justice, sexual violence, and restorative justice. We also offer trauma-informed therapy support for children and adolescents and survivors of sexual violence, and a robust community engagement program. Before we start, let's just take a moment to establish self-care, because we will have a sensitive conversation that can trigger our traumas or emotions. So I will just invite you to, one, take care of yourself. If you need to step out, if you need a break, if you need to have a glass of water, a cup of tea, please do that. Then please identify 5 objects in the room that you are in. It could be of the same colors, different colors, and try to go back to them whenever you feel triggered or whenever you feel that you need to be grounded again, so that you can take care of yourself. That's very important. I have this poem right here. It's called She Leads by a New York City Nigerian writer. Her name is Deborah Ice, and I will read it for you today. She had forgotten how to smile. She looked into the mirror, urging her muscles to remember the pattern. Her fingers edged her cheeks upward, tracing the outline of what she saw. She clawed into the depth of her soul, into the darkness that plagued her. She searched for a marvel, a sparkle of joy and light. They had put her down, stripped her of her purity, carted her like an object, sold her to the highest bidder. Her identity lost in more ways than one. She has survived. She has escaped. I think it is a beautiful poem, and please keep this with you today as we have this conversation. So our presentation overview for today will be dipping into understanding human trafficking, Trafficking Victims Protection Act, or TVPA, TV, immigration, and human trafficking, communicating with survivors or victims of human trafficking, and we will also be providing resources at the end. We will also have opportunities for you to ask any questions, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. So let's get started. Human trafficking, what is it? According to the US federal law, it is defined as the use of force, fraud, and coercion to compel a person into commercial sex or labor or services against his or her will. So this is our official definition here. Human trafficking is also a form of modern-day slavery. Victims of trafficking are exploited for commercial sex or labor purposes. Traffickers use force, fraud, and or coercion to achieve exploitation. And one of the things that I wanted to highlight is that after drug dealing, human trafficking is tied with the illegal arms trade as the second largest criminal industry in the world. And it is the fastest growing illegal business. Sex trafficking. So there's sex trafficking and labor trafficking. Let's also define the difference between these two. Sex trafficking or commercial sex act include induced by force, fraud, or coercion, or in which a person is performing the act is under age of 18. So it could be anyone that's being forced to do commercial sex by force or coercion or under the age of 18. Victims can be found working in massage parlors, a strip club, sports services, but we will also learn today that there's many other ways in which sex trafficking can happen. And then is, labor trafficking. Okay, labor trafficking is the use of force against fraud or coercion to recruit, harbor, transport, obtain, or employ a person for labor or services in involuntary servitude, debt, bondage, and slavery. Victims can be found in domestic situations as nannies or maids, working in factories, janitorial jobs, construction sites, farm work, restaurants, and panhandling. We will also see how victims can fall into being trafficked. Crime of trafficking occurs with the exploitation of the victim, right? So the victim needs to be exploited. And the physical movement of the victim, it's not a requisite. That means that, moving the person from one city to another city doesn't have to be a requisite to be considered human trafficking, right? It could happen in the same city, in the same neighborhood, and in many cases in their own home. The TVPA, which is the Trafficking Victim Protection Act, protects both U.S. citizens and non-citizens within the U.S. So before we continue our conversation here, I have this question right here. In your work with survivors, have you ever come across a client who has also been a victim of human trafficking? And if yes, how have they described their experience to you? I will give you all a minute to think about this question, and we will read your responses like in waterfall effect. So we have 1 minute to reflect on that question. All right, don't be shy. Right, I have worked with clients who have also been victim of human trafficking. And I was curious to hear if, your experiences when working with them. Oh, hold on, I don't think I was, okay. Okay, all right, so let's continue. Maybe we can share our experiences at the end. Oops. Okay, who are the victims of human trafficking? So this is where we learn about approximately 1 million of victims annually are trafficked across international borders worldwide. Between 18,000 and 20,000 victims are trafficked into the United States annually. And I think this number could be higher because they can come into the United States illegally and sometimes or through the border, and there's no way of tracking the real number of people that are coming in to be trafficked in the US. But this is approximately a number that they have. Both men and women are victims. Women and girls make 71% of human trafficking victims, and college students can be vulnerable also as well with social media usage, economic instability, and possible use of recreational substances. So this number tells us that there's a huge gap, right, between genders here, where women are usually more vulnerable to be victims of human trafficking. Then we have victims that can be trafficked into the US from anywhere in the world. Victims have come from, amongst other places, such as Africa, Asia, India, Latin America, Eastern Europe, Russia, and Canada. Many victims in the US do not speak English and are unable to communicate with service providers, police, or others who might be able to help them. And within the US, both citizens and non-citizens can be prey to traffickers or can be victims of trafficking. Okay. And then how are victims trafficked? So we mentioned at the beginning of when we were defining what was human trafficking, it is through the use of force, right? Beatings, confinement, and then fraud includes false and consecutive offers of employment, marriage, or better life. And this right here, fraud, it's very common. We at the Sexual Violence Project have clients who have been offered job opportunities in the city, and then those opportunities of employment were false, and they were forced through coercion and threats to do sex work. Coercion, it is a threats of serious harm to or physical restraint of any person, any scheme, plan, or pattern intended to cause victims to believe that failure to perform an act will result in restraint against them, or the abuse of threatened abuse of illegal process. And this again, coercion. When I'm talking about our clients, in both cases, they were both being seriously threat to either deportation, harming their family, or violence, right? Some clients were isolated or were, let's say, physically punished if they didn't cooperate with the traffickers. And it could be as serious as this. And there's a power and control dynamic here, or tactics. First, the trafficker try to target their victims by getting close to them, right? Gaining trust, or offering hope, like, I have a better job for you. I have a better work opportunity for you. You will make this much money here, right? Without telling them the full story so that they can build that trust. Meeting needs. Usually victims have needs, right? They need a job, or they need an opportunity. They need to move to another city, or they're hoping to get an opportunity that seems to be real, and the trafficker knows this vulnerability. They get to know their victims so that they can gain that trust by what they have to offer, quote unquote. Then they isolate their victims. I have clients that have been moved to other states, from New York to, let's say, California. And the way they did that was by targeting them, right? Gaining the trust, and then offering an opportunity and, moving them to that location. And then there, once the client was isolated, the trafficking began. And then there's exploitation, right? When the person is constantly being forced to do either sex trafficking, sex labor, or forced labor. So there's one question right here for you all. Please use the chat to answer. who do you believe is behind the trafficking? I would love to see your responses. There's no wrong or right answers here. Who do you think is doing the trafficking in the US, in our community? Come on, please type it in. I'm looking at the chat right now. Foreign and organized crime. Could be yes. Thank you. Anybody, Karen? Thank you. Sometimes someone you might know. Yes. Thank you, Michelle, for sharing. All right. Organized crime organization. Sometimes someone you might know. Yes. All of those responses are right. And we will learn more about who the traffickers are. So I wanted to show you this graph right here that tell us a lot about who the traffickers are. And this is from the human trafficking situations reported to the U.S. National Human Trafficking Hotline from 2020 to 2022. The top 5 exploiters are in labor trafficking, employer, 85%, familiar relationship to victims, 7%, recruiter, non-employer, 5%, a smuggler, 4%, intimate partner of victims, 3%, right? And then when it comes to sex trafficking, familiar relationship is number 1, 44%. Intimate partner violence or victims of intimate partner violence, 39%. Employer, 6%. Dealer illicit substance provider, 5%. And commercial sexual exploitation of children, 3%. The first time I saw this graph, I was truly shocked to learn that usually it's somebody that you know, like many of you mentioned in the chat. It's somebody close to the person, because remember what we were talking before about power and control. They try to first get close to the person, gain their trust, find a need, and use that to then exploit them. And it makes sense that a family member usually is at the top of the exploiter, right? Because they have access to the person. If it's a family member, if it's a partner, you're close to that person already. And it's easier for them to isolate their victims. It could be a parent sometimes, right? It could be a friend. It could be anyone, like many of you say. But keep this in mind when working with survivors. Sometimes, yes, it could be through a huge organization. Like I have clients that have been into that victimization. But most of the time, we are going to learn that it's someone that they know and they trust. And then this map right here shows the human trafficking cases by state. We see that the red states, the ones that are in color red, are the ones with more cases. And if we look at the location of this states, we have New York, right? Florida, Texas, and California, right? The ones that are usually at the border. Why? Because it's easy for traffickers to move their victims, right? Or we have a huge population of immigrants living there that are vulnerable, that are in need of jobs and opportunities. And the traffickers know this, so they target them, right? So let's look at this. We have other states like in the middle, right? There's not so many cases here in the middle of the US, but usually the borders are, or most cases are. So I have one question right here. What are some of the most common misconceptions, false beliefs, and myths that exist in today's regarding human trafficking? You can, again, write that in our chat box, and I will read your responses. We have 1 minute to reflect on it. What misconceptions, false beliefs, myths exist in today's society regarding human trafficking? What are the myths? Okay. That it is predominantly sex workers causing this. Yes, victim blaming, right? It only happens to certain people. Yes. They don't have to allow it or do it. Correct. Thank you all for sharing. So, yes, all of those myths are correct. And there's more, right? Doesn't end there. Um, all sex workers are willing participants. You guys mentioned that, right? Is this belief that it is their choice to do this? They want to do this without looking at all the other factors that lead a person to fall into human trafficking. The tactics that are used to keep victims into sex trafficking. All immigrants smuggled into the United States enter willingly. This is another misconception, right? We just saw the map, right, where in our borders we have the highest cases of human trafficking, which could be a correlation with people coming into the states, and they didn't want that. They were just trafficked. They are victims of human trafficking, and they might be working among us. Human trafficking only happens in developing countries. And that's not true. It can happen anywhere to anyone. Human trafficking always involves physical force or kidnapping. This is not true. I had a client that was trafficked in her community when she walked into an apartment where she was hired, quote unquote, to do cleaning, a cleaning job. She provided her business card out in the streets, providing her cleaning services because she was unemployed and needed a job. She had children. She had to pay her rent. And she found that, okay, I'm going to offer my cleaning services and I'm going to do flyer business cards so that I could give to people. She got one call one day to do a cleaning. And when she walked into this place, she was immediately, they removed all her belongings from her phone, her identification, and they immediately told her that she needed to do sex work. And if not, they were going to call the police, they were going to call immigration, they were going to contact her family and harm them. So a lot of threats, and it happened right there in her community. Um, and the person that reached out to her was an old lady that she looked like she could trust her, right? There was no red flags there. And yeah, so that didn't involve her being kidnapped, right? It involved a false opportunity, a hope of having an employment. Victims always, the other myths right here, victims will always ask for help if they are being trafficked. This is not true. Because of the dynamic of power and control, they might not be able to do that. They might not even know how to describe what they're going through. Or if it is a family member, right, it's really hard to come and share what's going on to them. And then there's other myths. Human trafficking is only a criminal issue, it's not a human right issue, right? It's not true. This is a human right issue. It violates many human rights. Okay, so Trafficking Victims Protection Act, the TVPA, it was signed into law October of 2000. And this was another fact that really shook me when I learned about it because it was just 5 years ago. Prior to 2000, no comprehensive law to protect victims of trafficking or prosecute traffickers. So there was no law in the US to protect victims or to prosecute traffickers, to prevent even human trafficking. There was no definition of it. Made human trafficking, after 2000, it made human trafficking a federal crime. And the goals of this law was one, to protect victims and provide federal law and state assistance to survivors. increase prosecution of human trafficking in the United States, and prevent human trafficking overseas. So after this Protection Act, the government started to provide funding to create all of these services for victims. And this was just, again, 25 years ago. How the TVPA affects what we do. So protection, prevention, and prosecution, right? With the TVPA, we get protection for victims, right? They can report the crime and they will be protected. And the prosecutors will go behind the traffickers, right? Prevention, and I don't know if you have seen in some airports in the US where you could see campaigns alerting people of human trafficking and providing a helpline for them to reach out, right? And prosecution as well. It creates new laws that criminalize trafficking regarding slavery, involuntary servitude, and peonage or forced labor. Enables victims to seek witness protection or other type of assistance like a T visa. Gives prosecutors and agents new tools to get legal immigration status for victims of trafficking during investigation and prosecution. Again, the T visa. Federal budget, the bill will authorize approximately 241 million each year from 2024 through 2028, for a total of 1.2 billion over that period for those purposes. And the Congress Budget Office estimates that implementing the bill will cost 628 million over 2024 and 2028 period, and another 520 million will be spent over 2029 and 2023. So this act is important because it provides resources to support victims and to prevent. And for that, we need organizations, we need staff, we need people out in the community working and supporting the victims. So this is important. In New York, we have certain laws in regard to human trafficking. The national and New York laws, these laws strengthens program preventing the purchase of products made by trafficking victims, collaboration between states and local enforcement, protect children, etc. Trafficking Victims Protection and Reauthorization Act, Protect Act, Senate Bill, have a bill right here, S59AAA, and Senate Bill SAA74, to name a few that are related to New York. And then we have New York regulation. These regulations identify and rescue victims, lobby for change, investigate and prosecute cases, and provide support for victims. New York State Human Trafficking Interventions Corps and New York Anti-Trafficking Network, Manhattan Human Trafficking Response Unit, Brooklyn District Attorney Human Trafficking Unit. And we also have the Special Victims Unit in each borough where victims of human trafficking can also get assistance and report cases of human trafficking. So DV and human trafficking. So we learned that there's a interconnection, right, between traffickers and victims. And women that are the most common victims of domestic violence and human trafficking. We have cases in the past of clients that were trafficked by their partner and forced to have sex with multiple people. Common use of power and control with buyers and traffickers. The dynamics of power and control in abusive relationship facilitate the sex trafficking for many survivors of human trafficking, right? That dynamic of power and control, controlling the person's finances. I had a client once that her partner found her a job and he talked to their boss, and basically he told her boss like to give her check to him, right? And she never saw a penny of her paycheck because he will take everything. And that's a form of labor trafficking. And she couldn't say anything because she was afraid of him and the threats that he will make at home. Immigration, according to the U.S. Department of State, immigrants are tracked into the States at rate of almost 20,000 per year. Immigrants, especially undocumented, are most at risk to trafficking due to vulnerabilities of language and lack of family and familiarity. And also lack of understanding the laws, understanding the new culture they're in and adjusting, being afraid, right? Which is very common for immigrants when you're new into a country and you are also enduring abuse and you don't have all the resources or support to seek help. So we continue our conversation in regards to trafficking and immigration. Human trafficking is not often discussed, which makes that hard to find. So I want you all to also keep this in mind. We have this data, we have this number, but it's also hard to track and have a solid number because many victims are still in abusive relationship or they're not reporting it. There is a correlation between human trafficking and domestic violence through emotional, physical abuse, manipulation, etc. Again, power and control dynamic. Although there's an estimate on how many immigrants are trafficked into the country per year, there's no data on nationalities undocumented, and the news are already here, right? And the ones that are already here in the United States being trafficked. Traffickers take advantage of vulnerabilities, therefore immigrants, documented or undocumented, are most vulnerable to being trafficked due to language barriers, lack of family here, lack of knowledge, and or opportunity. These are most of the clients that BIP serve. And I can speak for myself. The clients in my experience that I had that had been trafficked either for labor or sex trafficking had also been immigrants, very vulnerable, new to the country, new, to not speaking English, knowing the laws, and really wanting opportunities for work. So now I wanted to show you a video. Oh, sorry, I'm looking at. Oh, how do I fix this?
Perla, click on share in advanced sharing options.
Hold on.
It should give you the option to share the sound
Okay.
when you're sharing.
Advanced sharing options. 1 second, everyone. Share sound. I see it now. All right. Apologies. Okay. I will play it from the beginning.
Yes.
Human trafficking, a crime that preys on vulnerable men, women, and children. And now CBS 2 has learned it is happening to migrants. Many who are still in shelters cannot legally work and feel they're out of options. CBS 2's Jennifer Bisram reports.
Salen a partir de las 5, 6 de la tarde.
They usually leave at about 5 or 6 in the evening and return the next day at about 5 in the morning.
Trafficked from migrant shelters and into the hands of sex predators. We're concealing the identity of this asylum seeker who arrived from Peru last year and is living at a shelter in Jamaica, Queens.
It's very sad because you can hear the children crying. Most of the time it's because they are hungry, because there isn't someone responsible with them.
She tells CBS 2 vehicles pull up to the Crown Plaza Hotel, now a migrant shelter, and pick women up. Some return in the middle of the night, others in the morning, many leaving their kids all alone. The sound of children crying all night is hard to hear, and the women involved are hard to help.
They're taken to the job sites. They're promised one thing, but they're not given that. Some of them are abused physically or sexually.
The Compass Cafe, just blocks away from the shelter, and part of Hope NYC, is a safe haven for the community. Proceeds go towards initiatives like eradicating sex trafficking. And these days, in addition to praying with migrants, connecting them with resources, and encouraging them to report trafficking crimes, they're also offering free English-speaking classes.
They came and they learned how to say no, how to ask the right questions, how to interview, how to communicate with employers.
This is a soft interview room.
Federal agents with HSI, Homeland Security Investigations, are focused on rescuing victims and finding those behind trafficking and child exploitation.
Trafficking is occurring right now here in New York in all 5 boroughs and the surrounding area. There is a young migrant woman from Queens who was forced under the threat of deportation from her traffickers. She was driven upstate on a daily basis to have sex with anywhere between 40 and 60 men.
Arrests were made in that case, but the challenge for law enforcement is getting victims to speak up and report the heinous crimes. Last year, HSI New York's Human Trafficking Task Force identified 30 victims and made 38 arrests. But agents know there are many more victims and traffickers out there.
Because of the trauma and the threats of violence to the person and or the families, victims and survivors don't necessarily come forward.
On Long Island, ECLI Vibes is an organization that provides services for survivors of all trauma. Counselors say they've seen an uptick in young migrants.
Right. That's pretty much. Wanted to see your reaction to this video reflecting on human trafficking and the news in our city. Any feedback? Similar to one of the stories that they were sharing there, we at SVP had a client from Queens as well that was trafficked multiple times and moved to, let's say, New Jersey, and was also forced to have sex with more than 40 men per day. In her case, unfortunately, there was no arrest and she didn't get the support that would have made a difference from the police to prosecute these people, the criminals that were doing this, unfortunately. I don't know if you have any other reactions to the news. Okay, so communicating with victims of human trafficking. And I know I'm saying victim survivors, but let's just be mindful that many of them might not use the same language that we're using. So keeping that in mind. Fear of not being believed is very common among survivors or victims of human trafficking. So listen to their story and have generous curiosity. Be compassionate. But you know, it's like listen to their story. You can ask them questions. You can tell them why you're asking this question. It's because you want to understand, right? Many survivors have fear of deportation. And in the case of 2 of my clients, they have fear of deportation. And that was used as a threat for them to cooperate, right, with the traffickers. So keep this in mind. And be aware that the TVPA authorizes the special visas and other forms of immigration relief to certain trafficking victims if they collaborate with prosecutors and the police. They can benefit from that. Does not identify as a victim. Again, if they may not identify as a victim or survivor, sometimes we are very, in our language, we use this term. So just keep that in mind. And let them know that they're a victim or they survived this thing, but they're not criminals. And that what happened to what's happening to them is wrong. Distrust of law enforcement, and this is unfortunately something that happens. The lack of trust with law enforcement, and my clients being one of those that, although they reported it, nothing was done through the law enforcement, and they didn't want to go back and report it. But let them know that we can help them to get connected with law enforcement, advocating, going into the police prisons with them or the special victims unit to make this rapport and being there with them could make a huge difference, especially when they're ready to go and make a report. Many survivors may be unaware of their rights, so we need to be able to inform them that they have rights and that they have right to leave without being abused, without being forced to do any work that they don't want to do. That's very important to keep in mind. I'm not sure if anyone wants to add anything in the chat in terms of communicating with victims of human trafficking. I'll give you a minute to write it down so that I can read it. Right. Yep. Maybe at the end. So here I wanted to share some red flags for sex trafficking. Person seems overly fearful, submissive, tense, or paranoid. Person is deferring to another person before giving information. Like they look at the other person before providing you with information, or they ask the other person for permission before speaking to you. Person has physical injuries or branding, such as name tattoos or on face or chest, tattoos about money and sex, or pimps phrases. Clothing is inappropriately sexual or inappropriately for weather. A minor is unaccompanied at night or falters in giving an explanation of who they are with and what they are doing. Identification documents are held by another person and they have no access to their documents or their passports. Person works long or excessive hours or is always available on demand. Changes in the child's appearance, if it is a child, friends group, socioeconomic status, level of sexualization, activities, or relationship to authority. Signs of unusual wealth without explanation. You generally choose phones without any known form of income, especially if it is a minor. Person lives in a massage business or is not free to come and go. And the other thing that I wanted to highlight is that it may be no red flags to look for. It's really difficult sometimes to see these flags because of the power dynamic, because they're afraid, because they're not ready to speak up. Victims of trafficking and their needs. There are 4 general areas of victims' needs. Immediate assistance such as housing, food, medical, safety and security, language interpretation, and legal services. Mental health assistance. Many survivors of human trafficking experience anxiety, depression, PTSD. Counseling and therapy is important. Income assistance, cash and living assistance, especially because this person might not have access to any cash or any living assistance. They might, be living with the person that's trafficking them, and therefore they have no resources, no shelter, no money, nothing. And legal status, there's e-visa, immigration, and certifications that, they can get legal advice and see if these services or that there could be a venue for to support their immigration status. And then human trafficking organizations in New York City, we have us, the Sexual Violence Project at BIP, and we offer counseling, case management, and cognitive processing therapy to survivors of sex trafficking to help them overcome their traumatic experiences. Restore NYC is a nonprofit that helps survivors of human trafficking. They have referred people to us, and vice versa. We have referred people to them as well, and they offer case management, safe housing, and job placement. They also train organizations across the U.S. and have multilingual counselors. Though safe housing and shelter is specifically for survivors of human trafficking. Safe Horizon has also an anti-trafficking program. Girls Educational Mentoring Services works empowering girls between ages 12 and 24 who are survivors of human trafficking. Sanctuary for Families is also another provider services for human trafficking victims. And I have here the National Human Trafficking Helpline, which is available 24 hours, 7 days a week, and languages in English and Spanish. And the number is right there. I also want to say that in New York City, we know that the Special Victim Unit in each borough can support and help investigating crimes related to human trafficking. Now, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to put them in the chat, in the chat box. Yes. No question, maybe question from before that I missed. Let me see. You can email me your questions, maybe, if you have any questions. I can write my email in the chat right now. Can we get a copy of the presentation? Chamela will be emailing the recording of the presentation. How do you communicate to the victim that they are not responsible for what has happened today to them? Great question, Carol. So informing them about that what's happening to them is a crime, right? Letting them know that human trafficking is a crime and that it is illegal, that there's law that can protect them, right? Giving them that information and letting them decide what to do with that. And also letting them know that you are there to support them and to guide them or give them more information if they want to. All right, thank you. I don't see more questions. Thank you all. And that's the end of our presentation. Again, Chamela will be emailing the recording, and my email is also in the chat. Thank you for being here with me today.